Okay, let's get started. We have a pretty busy meeting, so let's get going. So hello, welcome to the Community Roundtable. This event is hosted by the Forestry Practitioners Network. This event is also made possible with funding support through the Canadian Council of Forest Ministers Climate Change Task Force. My name is Suzanne Sealing. I'm a project manager with the Climate Risk Institute, and I will be the moderator for today's event. Before we go further, I'd like to acknowledge that I am hosting this event in Robinson-Huron Treaty Territory on the traditional lands of the Atikamekshin, Anishinaabeg, as well as Wanapate First Nation. And CRI staff live and work in many places across Turtle Island that are the traditional lands of Indigenous peoples. Together, we're continually trying to improve our knowledge, processes, and relationships so that we can highlight and embody Indigenous perspectives and knowledge of climate change. A little housekeeping: if at any time you run into technical issues or you have questions about using Zoom features, please open the chat box, locate my name or host on the list, and send me a private message. Please note that your microphones have been automatically muted. However, there are several dedicated moments throughout the event where you'll have the opportunity to ask questions or comment using your microphone. You also always have the opportunity to enter your questions into the chat box, whichever you prefer. So we have an exciting lineup of agenda items for today's meeting. First, we'll hear from Brooke Tessema, who will provide an overview of the Forestry Adaptation Practitioners Network. This is followed by Cheryl Evans from the Intact Center on Climate Adaptation, who's here to share information on the suite of resources developed in collaboration with FireSmart Canada that are designed to increase resilience to wildfires across Canada. We then have 4 fellow FAPN members who have kindly put their name forward to provide an overview of their forestry and climate change related projects. You'll also have an opportunity to ask them questions. And finally, we'll wrap up and share the ways you can continue to stay involved in the network. Before I pass it to Brooke, I would like to introduce the team. So we have Brooke Tessema. He's a climate research assistant at CRI. He's been involved with the FAPN for about 2 years now. He's played an integral role in the transition from the previous platform to the current one. This includes the relocation of resources and also helping to inform the activities that we offer. Megan Simmons is a more recent addition, but her contributions are equally as important. She's a climate change adaptation analyst, and working alongside Brooke, Megan researches, organizes, and manages information, adds new content, and helps with the distribution of roundup emails and newsletters. Brooke and Megan sometimes post on behalf of members. Do not hesitate to reach out to us if you'd like us to make a post for you. Our team works hard to stay in tune with the latest research, best practices, and innovation in the forestry sector, and we attempt to bring it to the community's attention. But really, that information is the best to come from you, those who live and breathe this topic. Okay, so now I'll pass it off to Brooke, who will tell you about the FAPN.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Suzanne, for that great introduction. Before I begin, I would also like to gratefully acknowledge that I'm currently located on the traditional unceded territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. And today I would like to give you a brief overview of the Forestry Adaptation Practitioners Network, what it is and what our activities and what our features are. If you go to the next slide. So to start, just a bit of a history and background of what the FAPN is. It was previously known as the Forestry Adaptation Committee of Practice, or FACOP, and this community launched in 2012 as a subcommittee of a broader Climate Change Adaptation Committee of Practice that CRI was hosting at the time. We are funded by the Canadian Council of Forest Ministers, CCFM, who in 2012 set out to create a self-sustaining community of forest adaptation practitioners that can learn from each other. And that is essentially what a community of practice is a group of people who share a concern or a passion for something they do and learn how to do it better by interacting with each other. And building on the same mission, we redeveloped and we rebranded our platform last summer and launched the Forestry Adaptation Practitioners Network. And this came with an updated online platform, which I'll show you in a bit, And we did this because our platform was outdated and the networking function needed to be upgraded. So next slide. So our purpose, the purpose of the FAPN, it's essentially to provide a platform that is dedicated to persons interested in climate change impacts and adaptation options for forestry in Canada. And this is where we can share information and best practices on all things related to climate change and forestry adaptation. We strive to offer a variety of options for our members to participate and share your expertise and lessons learned. These can include resources, events, and other topics. And ultimately, we would like to provide you with a network of like-minded professionals that you can go to for support in your adaptation journey. Next slide. And how we do this mainly is through our online platform. And this kind of works as kind of a social network or feed for forestry and climate change adaptation related content. Some of the things you can find in the space are resources in our resource library, where we share some of the latest literature on a variety of adaptation related topics. We have an events calendar where we post upcoming forestry events around the country, as well as some of the ones we host. Next slide. And yeah, in this space, we currently have 203 members that are mostly from Canada, but also a few international members as well, including the US, as you can see in the breakdown. And we encourage all of our members to participate in the platform, and you can do this in a variety of ways, more than the two I previously mentioned. You can post any updates, add ideas. You can survey the members on any questions that you might have. You can even ask for specific help on specific questions, advertise jobs. So this could be an additional platform if you're looking for specific expertise. It can be an additional platform where you put that out there. Next slide. And building on that, there's other features that are also available in this network. One of the main ones is a directory of members. So you can network and connect with other like-minded individuals involved in the forestry adaptation space. And once you connect, you can also directly message them. And yeah, we also have different topics related to forestry adaptation. So you can use filter functions available on the platform to search by topic. And yeah, events calendar I've already mentioned, and the resource library as well. And another way another aspect of our work is through facilitating activities throughout the calendar year, so that you can keep an eye out for those. And these can include webinars on topics related to forestry adaptation, and have some of the topics here that we had last year was adaptation in action, and some that we're thinking about now is forestry and climate-related tools and services. We send out roundup emails on a bi-weekly basis just to keep you updated on all the posts that are going on in the space, so you don't have to always keep checking. You can always stay in the loop. We plan on doing a panel discussion where we bring experts from all over the country on a specific topic and have a facilitated discussion where our members can also ask questions. We mentioned the resource library again, and we can have reports, literature, as well as our past recordings and webinars. And last but not least, community roundtables such as this one, where we bring our members together to discuss and meet each other, as well as keep updated on what's going on different adaptation projects. And lastly, I'd like to emphasize that this is open to our members to suggest ideas. So we'd always like to hear from you on what serves you best and what kind of topics and activities you're interested in looking out for. So feel free to reach out to us with any ideas, any suggestions you have. And thank you. That is my overview.
Excellent. Thank you, Brooke. Great overview. Okay, wonderful. Now I would like to introduce today's speaker. Cheryl Evans leads Intact Center's initiatives Cheryl Evans is with the Intact Center on Climate Adaptation. Cheryl leads initiatives whose primary objective is to mobilize on-the-ground action to improve the resilience of Canadian homes, businesses, and communities to flooding and wildland-urban interface wildfires. Cheryl has over 20 years experience managing climate resilience focused public behavior change programs and developing professional risk assessment tools and training programs. Cheryl holds a Bachelor of Environmental Studies in Environment and Resource Studies from the University of Waterloo and starts her Master's in Disaster and Emergency Management at Royal Roads University this fall. Welcome, Cheryl, and thank you for presenting today. I will pass it off to you. I will stop sharing my slides.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. I will. Okay. Hopefully the technology will behave itself. Can people see that now? Can you give me a thumbs up? Okay, great. So I will just start from the beginning. I'm Cheryl Evans. Again, I'm the Director of Flood and Wildfire Resilience at the Intact Center on Climate Adaptation, University of Waterloo. And we gratefully acknowledge that our university campus in Waterloo is on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and the Six Nations of the Grand River. Today's presentation is called Collaborating with FireSmart Canada to Strengthen Community Wildfire Resilience. It will really be focused on the idea of collaboration and making an impact in community, and actually tracking data to see if you're actually making a difference and how you can improve your programs in communities. So in terms of the agenda today, we're going to do just a quick introduction to the Intact Center. We're going to discuss community engagement tactics to boost climate resilience based on our research. And we'll highlight the current collaborations that we have with FireSmart Canada, things that include infographics, door-to-door climate conversations programs, technical checklists, professional training programs, and climate resilience scorecard projects. Then we'll have 5 minutes for questions at the end. So first of all, the Intact Center is based at University of Waterloo, and we are an applied climate adaptation research center with a national focus. We were launched in 2015 with a gift from Intact Financial Corporation, but the little asterisk and gray box at the bottom there is very important. It reinforces that we operate independent of all funders, and we do not benefit from the sale of any products or services. That's really important in our work in community engagement, building trust for organizations and residents to understand that we are an independent research organization. So the Intact Center has two main goals. The first is to change the national conversation about climate change to address and include climate adaptation. The second is to work with residents, communities, and businesses to reduce risks associated with climate change and extreme weather events. We focus primarily on the perils of flood, wildfire, and extreme heat. And we often now know that these things often happen simultaneously. So this slide is really just a quick summary of all of the behavior change support practices that we've learned over the last 7 years at the Intact Center, but also I learned about that in my other work with community partners and in the private sector as well. The big picture here is that change happens one step at a time, and getting from one step to the next takes effort and energy. And as community organizers and community climate resilience advocates, you can work together to boost residents from one step in the series to another. So moving them from inaction to raising awareness, to identifying practical opportunities to reduce their risk, to completing a series of one-time actions, to the grand goal in all of this is to change patterns of behavior so for example, to complete seasonal maintenance that will maintain our homes and communities on an ongoing basis. So one of the most important things that we've learned is that people are very busy. They have a lot of competing priorities, and they're also very, very selective about who they trust for information. More and more, as we get more and more information from the internet, various sources, we're bombarded with information, and critical to whether or not we will listen to that information is the source of the information. Who do we trust? Who will we even consider listening to? So I have a whole presentation that looks at the different tactics that you can engage in to help residents move from one step to the next. And I can share that with you as an additional presentation. If you want, you can just reach out to me. But for now, I just have one slide that I've drawn from that presentation. It really focuses on tactics that we can use as a community to boost progress from awareness to identifying opportunities to reduce risk. So the things that we can do that we found work well at the Intact Center are to create self-help infographics, create really simple, user-friendly, stepwise information that helps people think about what can they do and what steps can they take, what's a logical progress. So the complex research that we did and the data that we've collected, we decided to summarize it in a really simple stepwise fashion. From step 1, maintaining what you've got at least twice a year. Step 2, complete simple upgrades. And number 3, complete more complex upgrades. So that is a process that we found is very engaging to the public. It's something you can share out, and you can see the infographic that's pictured here is flood. We started with flood and we eventually expanded into other perils, but you can see this infographic itself was shared by a variety of trusted organizations. This is Nova Scotia, so Buttonkeck First Nation, Antigonish County, and the town of Antigonish. They all collaborated to push this out in their communities in ways that would work for them. We then took that infographic and realized, well, we need a way to actually measure reach and measure if there's any impact from sharing that information. So we took these 3 steps infographic and created a self-help app that people could use to help them identify what they'd already done and help them identify what they might like to do in the future. And we can also get follow-up data from them about what they've actually done with that app. Now, at this time, we started thinking about, okay, if we want to actually collaborate with other partners, who can we collaborate with to use this approach? That's where we connected with FireSmart Canada. And at the end of this app, we also encourage people to do the FireSmart Begins at Home app through FireSmart Canada. So we cross-promote each other's apps. So that was the beginning of the journey with FireSmart Canada. One of the things that we did was we took simple infographics, resources, and collaborated with those trusted partners in community to get the word out. So it's not just who has created the information, it must be trustworthy, but who is sharing the information. So residents' trusted advisors may include their family, friends, and neighbors. That's actually the most commonly cited source of trusted information. Faith group and community group leaders, social agencies, contractors are a very significant one. Retailers, local governments, fire departments, insurance brokers, not-for-profits, real estate agents, and home inspectors. And as residents are weighing information that they're receiving, the level of trust weighs significantly on whether or not they're going to be making a change. And the ones that are trusted more, they figure more prominently in the decision-making process and have more influence than those who are not trusted. And this is just an example when we collaborated with the Clarington Fire Department. They had an open house. They were talking to people about how to reduce their risk of home fires, but also their community had experienced a significant flood, and the fire department was the first responders. And so they needed to get the information about home flood protection out to their residents to make sure that they knew what to do to reduce their risk. So this 3 steps document worked quite well, was well received and widely distributed. And that's where we continue the partnership with FireSmart Canada. We worked with them to identify some of these best practices that they had shared with residents for roughly 2 decades, and to take a simple approach with them to say, what can you do at first for free? What can you do as a simple upgrade for low cost? What can you do as a more expensive upgrade? So we collaborated with them to create 3 steps to cost-effective FireSmart home and share that out with them. And most recently, we on a related file, often heat comes before the fire. We created 3 steps to cost-effective home heat protection, and now we share out those resources with communities in a bundle. So from there, we took the technical guidance from the NRC's 200-page, really incredible and groundbreaking wildfire resilience guidelines, and summarize them into just a few short pages so that contractors would have a checklist that they could go through with residents and with businesses about what they can do to reduce their risk and sign up and move forward. So that was the next thing we did with FireSmart. And we had been collaborating with Red Cross to do a door-to-door education program through volunteers, have conversations where we tracked baseline, what were people already doing to reduce their risk, and have follow-up surveys to determine what people had actually done to protect their homes after the conversation with the resident, with the volunteer. So that worked really well with flood, and we collaborated with FireSmart Canada and FireSmart Alberta, and we started doing a paired outreach program late last year and early into this year related to flood and wildfire. And this year we're collaborating with FireSmart Canada and FireSmart BC to do an outreach program pilot test that lets people know about their risks related to extreme heat, fire, and flood, and also provides them with subsidies to help them to take action once they've identified what their risks are. We also developed a training program to empower those trusted information conveyors, such as insurance brokers, home inspectors, mortgage brokers, realtors, and property appraisers. And we just developed a simple program with their national organizations to raise awareness about what the risks are and how they could share information out, but also how it would benefit them and their clients, and essentially to boost their own business potential. So it's a win-win for everyone. And that works very well. And we are now collaborating with FireSmart Canada to develop a training course for landscape professionals. That will happen, it will start launching late fall 2023, with the goal of sharing that out in a very simplified version, again, with home inspectors, realtors, etc. So the final thing I'll talk about is a scorecard project that looks not at the residential scale, but at the community scale. So we were able to summarize best practices for community flood resilience and create a self-assessment scorecard that we ran with voluntary participants in 10 provinces in Canada in 2015 and 2020. So they're able to see where they were at and what they could do to improve their resilience. And that was well received as well. And this year, we've started collaborating with FireSmart Alberta and FireSmart Canada to create a climate resilient scorecard project that's related to wildfire resilience. So that's the project that we will be testing in 10 communities in Alberta, starting in this fall and with publication for next spring. But we hope to find out what worked well, what could be improved, scale that across Alberta, and look at opportunities for scaling that across Canada as well. So this is just, of course, the tip of the iceberg for research information, for resources. And just wanted to invite you to please have a look at the amazing resources available from FireSmart Canada. And also take a look at our website to see the depth and breadth of resources that we have. And please keep the conversation going. I'd love to hear from you. And like I said, please reach out to me if you'd like the more detailed slide deck about the behavior change tactics in communities. So with that, I think I will end it there. And I believe we have a few minutes for questions. So Suzanne, please take it away.
Yes, thanks, Cheryl. Wow, excellent suite of resources. Let's see if anybody has any questions. I don't see anything in the chat box. If you'd like to ask a question using your microphone, go ahead and raise your hand and I will pass it to you. Okay, Colin. Oops. Oh, sorry about that. Go ahead, Colin. You should be able to unmute yourself there. I'm having trouble for some reason.
Sorry, I did earlier.
There we go.
Hi, Cheryl. I'm based in Whistler on the West Coast, Squamish and Lilwat territory. And just a note that I look out my office window and see fuel management activities happening last year. And it's interesting with the community, what I hear from residents is a lot of questions around the impact of fuel management and the forestry and how different the forest looks. And I think one of the interesting things is risk and the effectiveness of treatment. So lots of people question the effectiveness, and there's lots of unknowns around that. And that's, I think, one of the challenges is often you don't know the effectiveness until the consequences, until after the fact. So, dealing with the impact of activities and fuel management activities and the conflicting objectives, whether they're recreational, forestry, carbon sequestration, and so forth. Have you run into that much?
I've heard from many communities how critically important it is to engage in conversations before any fuel management treatments are done. Find out what questions communities have, where they're at in sort of this steps in understanding, and to be open to their questions and their suggestions. And if they, for example, are interested in understanding why this is being done, it's really useful to share case studies of other organizations, other communities that have done something similar and had a positive impact that improved resilience. People do at the home level as well. They want to know that this is not just theoretical, that this is not something that's just a nice idea, that this is actually based on research. And it's been thought of very carefully, and that when it is going to happen, people will get notice that it's about to happen, and ways to prepare. For example, if there might be some smoke impact. So one of the critical things I've been hearing is just keep that conversation open, keep people part of the process, especially in the planning, to avoid protests. You want people to understand and support what you're doing to help it work as well as possible in a community.
Thanks. Yeah, lots of discussion that can be had.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks, Colin. Okay, Jade, go ahead.
Hi, Jade.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Long time no see. Excellent presentation. Thank you so much. Also nice to hear Clarington being recognized. It's a smaller community where I live. So as a great example, I just had more of a comment around kind of funding and shift in focus for kind of wildfire protection. Have you, I think it's really been since the Fort McMurray fires that mainstream media is really starting to focus on the impacts of wildfire in urban centers. Have you seen any kind of shift at, the levels of government in terms of starting to prioritize funding or engage research and not-for-profit institutions on developing some more proactive tools to help manage wildfires in both an urban and maybe rural setting?
In terms of government programming, it often comes in terms of provincial support for research and publication of practical tools. For example, after Fort McMurray in 2016, the Alberta government started to put more money into research related to what is going on in communities. Are they acting to prepare to understand the risks and take practical actions to prepare their communities? If they're not, what are the actual barriers, particularly around planning policies? Where are their hands tied? And in terms of regulations, but also what are the challenges, like Colin was asking about, in engaging community and getting their support? So that the research was really interesting and published just a couple of years ago. And one of the things that we're working on with Province of Alberta and FireSmart Alberta and FireSmart Canada is continuing that research so that we can say, okay, this is where people are getting stuck. Let's point them in the direction of these practical tools, but where the tools don't exist, or there are policy barriers, what is the additional research that we need to complete to move forward? So the short answer is yes, there is a shift. And after this year's record-breaking wildfire season, it's a very strong prompt for conversations at the federal level to take a lot of the guidance that they've invested so much money in developing and helping to implement that at the national model code level, and to provide additional supports to provinces. So it's really sparking a lot of very significant conversation right now.
That's really interesting to hear, like the process that Alberta went through, and hopefully other provinces, especially on the East Coast, that aren't as familiar with these situations will start to follow suit quite quickly. Thank you.
Definitely. You're welcome.
Thanks, Jade and Cheryl. Are there any other questions for Cheryl? Okay, Tracy, go ahead.
Hi, Tracy.
Hi, Cheryl. How are you?
Good.
I don't know if you and I talked, I think we talked about this a little bit in the last meeting that we had, but I just kind of, one of my questions, and maybe you're not the one to answer this, but it's becoming more and more clear to me that clearly we were looking at acknowledging Indigenous proactive fire management and stuff to get rid of underbrush and things like that to kind of control wildfire a little bit more, and embracing the idea that wildfire is actually, a natural process. And we've talked about that certainly to death, but I'm concerned because that what we're talking about is a lot of the things we're talking about, management of that underbrush and things like that. We're talking about controlled burns, and it just seems counterintuitive when we're talking at the same time about, mitigation and not releasing GHGs or carbon into the atmosphere, but we're going to do controlled burns. And it just seems like, is there any that you're aware of other ways of controlling that forestry practice or controlling underbrush, et cetera, which is fuel for a fire, other than just burning it, that's been shown to be effective?
Sure. So the FireSmart folks and forestry folks are, of course, experts in looking at what are the best options for fuel management. Is it fuel removal? So is it, logging? For example, you can turn those trees into commercial products, obviously. It is switching the type of tree or the type of fuels for one type of tree, say that's more fire prone, to something that's still commercially valuable, but is less fire prone. And then of course there's the things like controlled burning, but you can also do things like partner with local farmers and get the sheep and the cows and the very tough goats to be grazing. Now, something that fascinating, and we're just about to launch a national wildfire resilience report, probably September, early October. But one of the case studies in there is fascinating, and it's from Australia. They've had their lots of share with wildfire, lots of experience, but they've run the numbers, and what they've found is that when you do your preventative burning, your controlled burns, it reduces the likelihood that you will have these large out of control burns. And they found that by supporting through their greenhouse gas reduction program, supporting control burns and giving organizations greenhouse gas credits for doing that, you actually reduce the likelihood that you'll have a very significant greenhouse gas output from an out of control wildfire. So I can send you the case study right now if you want. But it's so counterintuitive, such a fascinating idea that you would burn to reduce likelihood of burning. And it's a great something that we need to start talking about, of course, with Indigenous collaborators. But it does sound counterintuitive, but to reduce the amount of fuel is really what the key is, to reduce the likelihood of these high intensity out of control fires. Okay. So that's part of their greenhouse gas credit program. And it turns out that it's Indigenous fire keepers that manage large swaths of land. They're actually creating more greenhouse gas credits than other players. So they get to sell those credits to those other organizations. So it's a win-win for them. They've got staff, they've now got money coming in. It's a tremendous, exciting notion.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
There's a lot of really great comments coming in about this. Let's keep it moving. Matt, do you have anything to add to that, or perhaps another?
Yeah, no, I want, yeah, thanks. Thanks, Cheryl.
Hi, Matt.
I just wanted to ask about, it's a great presentation. You mentioned at the end, tracking behavioral changes, and what we're doing here is essentially trying to convince individuals of actions. And I'm wondering, and this is a very broad question, but would you have any kind of advice or thoughts on if you're trying to convince small companies or companies in general? We're talking about here about FireSmarting, doing FireSmart with houses. If we kind of zoom out and go to kind of a woodlands type of scale, there's certain things that companies can do, and sometimes it has to do with grants and funds and all that. But is there anything? Does behavior not really work with companies? Is it more just about the tools, or what? Is there any kind of comparison to? Is there anything to say about convincing a company versus convincing an owner of a house?
So yeah, that's a great question. Essentially, in my mind, behavior change is sales. It's all sales. So when you have your target audience, it's fantastic if you can get some key stakeholders, some subject matter experts in that field to take a look at your draft material. For example, if you got some outreach materials for businesses to help them understand what their risks are, how to reduce risk, how to access subsidies, etc. It's really amazing if you can have a little chat with, say, even 3 companies and say, this is what we're thinking of. How does this work for you? And then they might say something, in my experience with Kitchener and subsidy programs, they might say, well, that's nice, but we need to show a return on investment of 5 years. Otherwise, we're not going to look at it. So you can find out from them how to reframe it, or you can start talking to them and collaborating, say, with the Insurance Bureau of Canada about how does this actually impact your insurance, your insurability, and find out what's a sweet spot for them with the insurance angle. But you really, in order to engage your audience and support your audience, it's best if you build programs with them and then they make sense to them and then they will buy in. Otherwise, you're taking a great wild guess, but it's likely going to be a little bit off. So when we were doing our training programs that we were developing with, say, Insurance Brokers Association of Canada, etc., we co-created those programs with those associations so that we get the messaging right, the angle right, the resources right. So that's the main thing I would suggest. Get some draft materials that you think would work, and then have a coffee with 3 people and see what they think. They'll tell you. They'll say, sorry, this is not worth my time. I won't get the this is ugly, for example. This is too expensive. So they'll give you all the information you need. And please share it with others within the FireSmart network, because they'd love to know too.
I wonder, does anybody else on the call have experience with this? Feel free to raise your hand. Okay.
I mean, I have loose experience, but I wouldn't call it kind of complete. I've been started. I mean, often it's a matter of a nonprofit like the company I work for. We have funds to engage, but whether engage all sorts of forestry companies, but how much they're willing to kind of give back is sort of how much they understand what's going on, or the reasoning for it is all. It's a bunch of workshops, and sometimes it works out more for some companies than others. Some are just more engaged. I don't know if it's just about, you also need a champion at that one company as well.
Mm-hmm.
The champion really makes a difference. You get the messaging right, but it's really one person that will pull it forward and sell who they need to sell, right? Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly every provincial, every province and territory in Canada has a FireSmart representative, and then a lot of local jurisdictions will have them as well, and they can give you the inside scoop and provide you support on how you might consider to develop these programs. And it's so important, if you can, to integrate the evaluation piece throughout the program, so you can find out, where did people start? What did they do? Where did they get stuck? Where can we improve in future? And those learnings are gold. They are gold. You can, if you're interested, just give me an email and I'll help you brainstorm later. We're probably out of time now, but I love this. It's solving puzzles essentially.
Mm-hmm. This is also a perfect question to post to the network online, and gives exposure to all 200 plus other members who might be able to have something to say. Jade, I'll go ahead.
I'll be really quick, so I'm cognizant of time, but just wanted to echo some of the comments around the key champion. But I think the other pieces is the long-standing presence and communications. I think of some of the most successful programs around invasive species management, and not ones that kind of came and went when the issue was right in front of us, but the ones that have stuck around for years, because it is a bit of a change management process. These communication pieces, and change takes time. You of course have the early adopters, but then you have the laggards, and if we're truly going to be successful with any engagement program, it really has to have a long time period. And the challenge with that is, for the NGOs, especially that are running them, is funding is typically short term. It's still very much politically driven, unfortunately. And that, I think, is like the biggest mechanism that needs to shift for us to be successful in all adaptation programs. Is like there needs to be more long-term funding. I'm talking like 10, 15 years to support specific campaigns, so that you can really build in those change processes and and be successful, so that you can take advantage of the key champions, but then also use those key champions to influence those down the road that may not be ready to buy in right away. So just wanted to throw that out there.
I totally agree, Jade. And it's a bit of a chicken and egg thing too, because often with those programs, they're really, they support development and implementation, and they're very, very light on the evaluation piece. And the thing is, if you can't effectively evaluate to say that this program worked and made a difference, how are you supposed to get more funding? So that's one thing that's critical as well, is you have to have proper funding for evaluation so that you can make the case to continue, because yeah, this is it's a long-term stepwise journey for sure.
Okay, thanks. So now we're going to pivot. So we'd really like to do a quick meet and greet. We have a smaller group today, so I think we can do this. If you're more comfortable just entering your response in the chat box, that's fine. Otherwise, raise your hand and we'll hear you using your microphone. So we would like to know 3 things: your name, your organization, and your favorite type of tree or forest. Would anybody like to kick us off?
I'll start if you like. I didn't put up my hand, sorry, but because I have a hard stop at 2, so I gotta go anyway. But,
good to know.
my name is Tracy Iso. Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me here today. And this is fun to get some different perspectives, and nice to hear Cheryl speak. It was a great presentation. I work for Intact Public Entities, so I'm not related to what Cheryl does at all, because we're a branch of Intact Financial Corp, and we specialize in ensuring municipal governments and public entities across Canada. My job is a risk assessment and solutions manager, so I do a lot of work on climate change and informing our municipalities how to kind of adapt to climate change, hopefully using nature-based solutions, but that's a presentation for a different day. And my favorite type of tree, because I live in Waterloo, is the black walnut.
Lovely, love it. Thanks for that. That's perfect. Richard, go ahead. Oh, wait, I think we're missing your. Is it just me? I can't hear your word.
No, I think he's on mute.
It says unmuted though. Strange. Try again. Richard, can I get you to unmute?
Yeah.
Oh, it's your microphone. Yeah, Megan, thanks for pointing that out. Your microphone's lifted up.
Sorry. Yeah, there. Is that better?
Yes, perfect. Start again.
All right. Yeah. Richard Carr, Natural Resources Canada, Canadian Forest Service. I probably don't have a real favorite type of forest, but I grew up on the prairies. So wherever there's willow thickets, I like those. They're kind of thick, sheltering bunches of trees. But I really kind of like open evergreen forests as well, ponderosa pine or lodgepole pine, with not a lot of thick undergrowth, like to be able to walk around. So,
yeah.
All right, that's it for now.
Anybody else? Go ahead, Jade.
I've already spoken, but now I'll introduce myself. So I'm Jade Schofield. I am a senior consultant with WSP for climate risk and resilience, but I'm actually right in the stages of transitioning positions. I'm going over to the Delphi group at the end of this week. So LinkedIn is the best way to keep hold of me. In addition, I'm also the president of the Ontario Urban Forest Council, which is a not-for-profit that's actually been around for 65 years. And our goal is to advocate and enhance knowledge and awareness for enhancing urban forestry. So that's me. And then favorite tree, I can't pick a favorite tree, but a forest type. I really love the Carolinian forest, being here in Southern Ontario, the diversity that comes with it, both the coniferous and deciduous trees, and just all of its plentiful bounty. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody else? Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I'm Matt Kroski. I'm a research engineer in Vancouver, and I work for FP Innovations. We're a nonprofit forestry research company for all Canada. So we work with private companies, large and small, as well. Most provinces, if not all provinces, are also members, and we work with Natural Resources Canada. So we do a lot of leveraging different funding sources to help our members, and our overall mission is to keep and make Canada's forest industry more competitive in the global stage. And so, yeah, so I do a bunch of climate change work recently with flooding and wildfires and landslides, and also do some kind of geomatics and more GIS stuff as well, all to do with forestry. My favorite tree has to be, since I moved out west over maybe 20 years ago, just the classic cedar.
Great. Welcome. Thank you, Matt. Erin, go ahead.
Hey everybody, I'm Erin Fraser-Reed, the acting climate change adaptation lead with Natural Resources Canada, Canadian Forest Service here in Edmonton. One of the projects that I'm working on, which actually has great linkages to what Cheryl was talking about, is I'm actually working on creating a guidebook for forest-based communities to basically go through a vulnerability assessment process to evaluate their own areas of risk or opportunity, and then sort of brainstorm some adaptations that might address those areas of risk or opportunity. So these linkages with FireSmart and communities obviously will be pretty key for that. So I thought that was super interesting, and thank you for all that great info. In terms of my favorite tree, I will have to go with white bark pine. Our Alberta's endangered tree species. It exists right at the limit of where anything can survive. So I've got to respect a tree that can basically just live on rocks. So that's, yeah, I'll go leave it there. So thank you.
Thanks. Cheryl, go ahead.
Thank you. Erin, that was really interesting. I'd love to connect with you by email after and do some brainstorming. Sounds like amazing work. Thanks. So you already know who I am. My favorite forest is an oak savanna. When I was at university, I was really interested in restoration ecology. And my prof really liked to work with First Nations communities and learn about how they'd use fire on the land to maintain landscapes. And so he took me down to Sauvel Beach, which is not far from Waterloo. And they did control burns and the oak savanna there to burn off weedy tree species and keep the forest open. So I thought it sounded crazy when I first heard about it, but then I came to understand the logic and found it extremely fascinating.
Thanks for sharing. Inspiring story. Annabella?
Hi, I'm Annabella Bonella. I work at the Intact Center on Climate Adaptation with Cheryl, and I'm helping out Cheryl on the wildfire file. My favorite type of forest is like any forest pretty much that you can walk in, but I have two, and one of them is a Carolinian forest because I live in Southern Ontario. And the second is where I got to do my PhD, which is the Patagonian forest on the mountain side of the Andes in Southern Argentina. And it holds like a super special place in my heart. So yeah, thank you for having me today. It was great to hear everyone's comments.
Thanks, Annabella. Okay, we're going to quickly shift gears. Richard and Colin, yes, let's do this. Richard, why don't we jump here to, so we're going to do our member project updates. We really want to hear from you. So Richard, why don't you go first? Tell us your update and yeah.
All right, I'm just going to share my little PowerPoint here.
So what we'll do is have everybody just hold their questions until the end.
All right, so Is my title slide coming through all right there?
Yes, looks great.
Yeah, all right. So I'm gonna have to skip through this fairly quickly, just because I have to go. And one of the things I talk about in here is what I'm doing next. So what I want to discuss really is fire weather forecasting. And within Natural Resources Canada, it's on a federal, like a national scale. So it's involves a lot of different time scales. Short term is maybe out to a week. So, go through 1 to 7 days. We do a medium term outlook as well, going out to about a month. So kind of the 2 to 4 week period. Seasonal forecasting, long term, and kind of sort of bridging the gap between interannual research type projects as well. I'm not directly involved as a researcher, but certainly contribute to products, and we bring some of those results into our operational type products. So a lot of this revolves around the Canadian Wildland Fire Information System, CWFIS. There's the URL up there. This website is in the process of being changed a lot. So if you look at this in 2024, it'll probably look completely different and have a lot of different types of information on it. But basically, the observed fire weather conditions and the forecasts out to a couple of weeks are encapsulated in those 2 boxes, fire weather and fire behavior. Then on the left-hand panel, you'll see current conditions, which includes hotspots. That's heat signatures detected from satellites. That's the little map at the right. Fire danger, fire weather, fire behavior. Going out a bit farther, we've got our monthly and seasonal forecast down there. And it's been a very important topic this year with the big wildland fire season that we've had. And been involved in a number of press briefings and lots of calls from media of various sorts from Canada, the US, and all over the world, in fact. So with the CWFIS, when we get these big fire seasons, well, the usage increases exponentially. There's a lot of varied users, and we've had a huge number of hits this year. I think probably 150 million or so at the last statistic that I've looked at, which is probably a couple of weeks ago. All right, so just a few sample maps here, just looking at one of our number of maps that comprise the Canadian Forest Fire Weather Index System. The build-up index is just a sample, just illustrating the time scales. So on the left, at the time I did this, was from observed conditions. Use a number of weather stations from Environment and Climate Change Canada, provincial and territorial fire weather networks, and a lot of states from the United States as well. Altogether, we've got over 2,000 weather stations listed at the moment, and we still have some provinces and territories that we have to tap into, but that is coming. And forecast, short-term forecast, as in the middle map here, was just going out a couple of days at the time. So we use the ECCC's scribe matrices, which was model output tailored for their forecasters. And that process is changing and going to what they call weather elements on the grid, or WEONG. So instead of using data for 800 or so locations across the country, it'll be more of a gridded solution. So that's underway at the moment. Once you get up past that, days 4 to 16, we use the North American Ensemble Forecast System, or NAIF. So that's both Canada and the United States weather forecast models running together. Each ensemble element might use a different type of initial condition or different physics. And just the best usage of that, I think, is a whole research project in itself. So there's potential for lots of work going into that going forward. I do have a meteorology background. I've got my Bachelor of Science and specialization in meteorology from the University of Alberta here. So when colleagues within the Northern Forestry Centre in Edmonton here learned I had the meteorology background, they requested in-house weather forecasts. Like, well, you know the weather, you can tell us about it. So I kind of started these weather briefings. And one of the years that I was doing that, we had staff from the Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Centre, or CIFC, that were visiting here, and I saw uses in using these type of briefings for strategic fire suppression resource planning. So that's the outfit that coordinates the exchange of crews and equipment between provinces and territories, and between international countries in Canada. So we started doing briefings on Wednesday morning before the duty officer conference calls, which involve a representative from each province and territory. Those take place on Wednesday morning. They look out for 1 week. Just in the background is just one sample map from those. They use quite a variety of information. A few years ago, we started up the strategic planning unit as well. This is another SIFSI effort, but it involves various people from Natural Resources Canada as well. We have our International Affairs Office that helps coordinate international assistance. We've got agreements with half a dozen countries where we can call in crews when we need them. So if Canada runs out of resources, we can tap into these international agreements. And we've done a few of those on the fly this year, just kind of temporary MOUs so that we can get crews from other countries as well. But with those, we're looking out into that 2 to 4 week forecast period, because when you bring crews over, we want to have them here for a month. You know, if the conditions necessitate that, we'll bring them over. If it looks like it's going to get rainy all across the country, then, you know, there's probably not the need to tap into those international groups. But it's just one of the gears that help drive this acquisition of international people. There's Transport Canada that may be involved if aircraft come in, border services people, RCMP people, got to get them in quickly. So, you know, any types of checks or visas or anything needs to be arranged fairly fast. Just very simple look at some of the stuff that might go into one of the Wednesday briefings, kind of a graphic summary illustrating what might happen. Use a lot of value-added products from Environment Climate Change Canada, so work fairly closely with them. The top right is a lightning map with color coding for the Duff moisture code, which is the moisture content in the middle of the forest floor where lightning strikes will start fires. So if it's orange, yellow, orange, or red, but a higher likelihood of starting a fire. If it's blue or green, not so much. We also supply index trends, color-coded for the type of activity that we're expecting in each province or territory or region. Into the seasonal forecast, you know, we've been at this for over 15 years now. Carrie Anderson, one of my former colleagues, initiated this process in 2006 using ECCC's CANSIPS, that's Canadian Seasonal to Annual Prediction System models and outputs from the CWFIS. So we got to develop a baseline climatology with a 30-year hindcast from the model output, calculate daily severity rating for about 300 locations across the country, roll those into monthly values and compare those with the same month's historical means to come out with the type of anomaly maps that you see at the top right. So we post those on the first day of each month through the fire season, starting from April going through September on the CWFIS. We also adjust those a little bit to produce shape files, just line maps, as you see at the bottom there, for the monthly briefing notes to our Federal Minister of Natural Resources. With those, we can exclude areas like agricultural regions that might not sustain much fire through the growing season, or maybe tall mountain ranges where it's mostly rock and ice. So we might exclude some of those areas based on things like that. Also with the North American seasonal forecast assessment outlook on the right, we include information from Mexico and the US. These are put together in Boise, Idaho. So we might adjust boundaries a little bit to match up with what the US is supplying, so we don't have large discontinuities across the international boundaries. Research projects. Various researchers, some are from NRCan, ECCC, we've got collaborations with universities, some international people and groups as well. A lot of that's looking at fire weather index trends with climate change, burned area trends, etc. We've got some researchers working on ocean atmosphere teleconnections and the effects on fire season. So when we get better handles on those, we should be able to better predict what type of fire season we'll have. Some of that will be presented every couple of years at the Wildland Fire Canada conferences, so we can look for those. Next one's in 2024. So you're gonna have to skip off here. So there's my contact information. I don't know if I have time to really answer questions at the moment, but I probably follow up with you on that.
Yeah,
Just
thanks,
for,
Richard. Thanks so much.
and thanks for the opportunity.
Very interesting work. Yeah, we'll make some ways for people to ask questions. Colin, do we still have you?
Yeah, we do. I've got
Okay.
understanding next meeting people. So yeah, I can just, thanks, Richard. Appreciate it. There's lots of useful information here, and I apologize if got short on time. I think adaptation is a huge field, and fire is one aspect of it. And I was going to speak briefly to an international project that's just starting up, and it seems like there's lots of Waterloo connections today. And Suzanne has the detailed information, so she can share the links. But it's called the Fin Capes Project, and it's sponsored by Global Affairs Canada. And we're looking at one aspect of it is nature-based solutions, particularly with mangrove restoration and conservation, as well as peatlands. And peatland fires are a huge issue 5 to 10 years ago, when there was a lot of drainage happening for rice paddies and conversion to agriculture. And what's happening now is learning from those mistakes. There's a re-wetting of the peatlands to peatland in Canada. And there's another University of Waterloo project, CanPeat, looking at below ground carbon. So there's a lot of overlaps and linkages between Canadian research, mitigation and adaptation. And also just a note, there's an awful lot of expertise internationally and activities going on. For example, we're working with a forestry school in Indonesia that has 190 faculty members, and in terms of expertise around nature-based solutions and tropical forests and peatlands and carbon. There's a lot of expertise that we can draw on and a lot of opportunities for exchanges. So that was just an introduction. And there's looking if we're going to have an international component to the practitioners, there's lots of domestic stuff. So for example, on the FireSmart, I'm involved in the community forest here. And so there's lots of things around community forests that are really worthwhile to share. So there's a huge field of practice. The challenge is sort of this. So that's my 2 bits.
That's
Thanks.
excellent. Oh, thanks. I wish we could discuss so much more, but thanks so much, Colin. Great. Okay. Matt, Jade, we have you next.
Yeah, I can go ahead just very quickly. I just wanted to mention there's a tool called Climate Vulnerability Forest Management Tool that FP Innovations put out last year, and it is focused on BC, and it essentially uses publicly available data from PKIC and from ECCC, and post-processes it so it's a coherent story that forest practitioners, forest professionals can use. And we essentially broke it down into, here's the types of climate indicators that are most concerned, here's the types of forest operations that might affect, and that was all based on some workshops. So we're looking at taking that tool outside of BC this and next year. So I'm just kind of putting out that information out there in case that type of forest operations look at climate change is something that any of you are working on. There's opportunity for kind of, if we're going to be creating new data sets or doing new post-processing, if we're working in Ontario, but you're interested in Saskatchewan, like we can easily kind of accommodate for what kind of work will get done over the kind of next year. So one of there's 6, I'll just drop in a link to the actual tool, and one of the kind of proxy indicators is for wildfire. But it's one of many potential ones. It's a question I was going to ask Richard, but I'll probably ask on email.
Really interesting. Thanks, and thanks for dropping that link. Good. Okay, keeping it moving. Jade.
2 small things I just wanted to share. So WSP actually just in at the end of March, finished working with the Halifax Regional Municipality to do some wildfire exposure mapping. So who knew that the situation would unfold the way it did? But one of the things maybe for a future conversation is we could potentially connect with them and actually walk you through the method that we chose, because we weren't just looking at, and this was for climate, not for weather, just wanted to clarify, looking at the 3 different time horizons, but also looking at the situation on the ground too. So in terms of what types of natural cover and you know, where there is actually more significant exposure. So I just wanted to share that there's that out there. And then the second piece I wanted to share is with the Ontario Urban Forest Council. We're actually just commencing a research study where we're going to be going through doing pretty in-depth dive of municipal climate policies relating to urban forests to see what is out there. And we're actually hopefully by the end of this year, towards the early next year, creating a bit of an urban forest policy atlas, which will also focus on climate forestry policy. So if you have any contacts or anyone you think that we should be kind of honing in, Ontario is pretty big. We would love your feedback, and it is intended to be a live tool so that other jurisdictions can go in and upload their research or their work once the tool has been developed. So it becomes kind of like a live database. So 2 little things there. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Yes, good. Okay. Okay, so thanks, Colin, Richard, Jade, and Matt. We will make sure this information gets available to others who might have had to drop off and also who couldn't make it today. So just quickly then, accessing resources after this meeting, we will post it to the network, of course. We also have a YouTube channel where we'll post this recording and you can access previous webinars that we've hosted and run. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to reach out. You can email me directly. You can also use the chat or email function that's built into the platform of the FAPN. And there's a link on the bottom to join, become a member, and access the network. So I really appreciate everybody's time today. My apologies if I've gone over, but this was really fantastic. This was what we're calling a pilot event. We haven't run this format before, so we're gonna take feedback from it and go from there. Any last comments? Great. Yep. Okay. All right. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll be in touch soon.
All right. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you. Bye.